Well, all right. Good morning. I have five after. So let's begin. I hope everybody's doing well. Thanks for joining us this morning for session two of our three-part series focusing on the work we need to do to target our improvement efforts. Um, I hope that I have met most of you by now, but if not, I am Renee Aziz. I lead the Virtuoso Education Consulting Team, and we are partnering with the IEP TA Center to support your needs around technical assistance. So again, welcome. I am excited to have a conversation with you today. Really, we designed today's session to be interactive. I'm not really in. My goal is not to necessarily give you additional information in the way that we covered a lot in session one. Rather, my goal is to give you a couple of protocols so that you can be checking the depth of your work to make sure you're on the right path toward realizing the outcomes that you desire related to student growth and overall school improvement. So think of today as really a status check, just checking in on the work that you've done before so far and really honing in, going deeper, course correcting if we decide that is appropriate for you to do. So I'm excited to hear about your updates. I did build this session so that you will have some time to do some thinking work, either alone or with your teams if you have team members with you. So I invite you to be as interactive as you desire to be. We welcome that certainly. We design the session so that we can really have a conversation and not just me talking to you through the screen. So with that said, on the screen now, you should see an intro slide and there's a QR code. If you use that QR code, it'll get you to our Padlet. It's the same Padlet as last time, except for I've added a couple of documents that say session two. So depending on the device you're looking at the Padlet on, you might have to scroll all the way down. Or if I'm looking on my phone, I just turn my phone and then it'll show me session two right beside session one. So you should see three documents for session two. So let's get going. Let's do some team connections pretty quickly here. Because we're virtual, I have an activity that you can really utilize the chat for. So I'm going to show you some cards, and your task is to tell me which cards we should flip. Easy as that. Here's my hypothesis, though. I'm telling you that I believe if a card has a vowel on one side, then it should have an even number on the other. That's my hypothesis. If a card has a vowel on one side, then it should have an even number on the other side when I flip it. So I want you to think, and then in the chat, write the number, how many cards you think we should turn over to test that hypothesis, and then post your answer in the chat. You don't have to say why in the chat, but just tell me the cards that you suggest we turn over if we want to test the hypothesis that if a card has a vowel on one side, it's going to have an even number on the other. What do you think? I'll give you 1 minute. Muted myself. All right, final call for your answers. What cards do you think? See lots of A and fours. Erica says all of them. Rihanna says three. I think most others say A and four. Okay, four. All right. Well, let's talk about it. So again, the hypothesis is if a card has a vowel on one side, then it has an even number on the other. So imagine we flip the cards and this is what we see. We flip the A card, we see a two. We flip the four card, as you said, we see an E. Show me a reaction then about our hypothesis. Is it true, thumbs up, or untrue, thumbs down? Reaction or chat. Yeah, or you can put it in the chat. Okay, Erica says maybe because remember, Erica wanted to turn all the cards. All right, Erica, let's do it. Let's turn all the cards. If we flip the seven card, it has an I. And if we flip D, it has a six. So now tell me in the chat, is my hypothesis confirmed or not? All right, you see the chats coming through. Pay attention to what your colleagues are sharing. And let's talk about it. My hypothesis was about a vowel. If a card has a vowel on one side, then it has an even number on the other. My hypothesis was about vowels. So turning the A card supports that hypothesis because my hypothesis was about vowels. I turned it and it had a two. Turning the four card is also consistent with the hypothesis, right? Because when I turned it, the card had a vowel on the other side, right? And if a card has a vowel, then I expect an even number. So this also supports the hypothesis. So when I stopped there initially, if we weren't thinking deeply, we might have said, yes, absolutely, hypothesis supported. If those are the only cards we turn, however, we are at risk of not seeing the whole picture. So when we turn the seven card, that actually falsifies our hypothesis because remember that seven card had the vowel I on the other side. My expectation is if a card has a vowel, it should have even. So flipping the seven card falsifies that hypothesis. And did we need to flip the D card? Erica wanted us to, but we didn't really have to flip it because we didn't have a hypothesis at all about consonants. A consonant could have had an even number, but it could have had an odd number. Our hypothesis was not at all about consonants. What does this mean, Renee? Why are we flipping cards bright and early in the morning on this Wednesday? Well, we are going to be talking about your current work. I'm going to be asking you to think about what you know, how you know it, whether or not you're making progress. And I really want you to fight confirmation bias. I don't want you to spend your time in our session today confirming that which you believe, your hypothesis. Instead, I want you to be intentional about flipping the 7 card. Whatever that 7 card represents in your setting, I want you to be intentional about flipping that card to ensure that you're seeing the whole picture of the things that are going to be required in order for you to shift student outcomes in your setting. Ideally, if you had gobs of time and endless amounts of resources, flip all the cards just to check. But that's not likely your reality. You're always going to be pressed for time and resources. So be strategic about what questions you're asking, what data you're pulling, what resources you're using, because you can't do all the things. You got to be very specific about what your strategies are, which strategies are really going to make the greatest impact on students and your system. So thanks for playing my card game this morning. And I will, throughout this morning, suggest that we all take a moment and turn the 7 card. How are you ensuring you're flipping that card? And remind one another, if you're together with your colleagues, you all, what is our 7? What's our 7 card? What are we overlooking? What might we need to check? You have to be intentional in that way. Comments, questions, thoughts, you can unmute yourself. Today, as we have these chat breaks, we are open to your comments and your interaction with us. So any thoughts about this? Comments? All right, seeing none, we're going to move forward. So today, here are our objectives. In addition to just refreshing where we landed in session 1, I want to, again, as I mentioned at the beginning of our talk today, my intention is not to give you additional new information to be considering as you determine your areas of focus. Rather, today is really designed to give you protocols for digging deeper. So I want you to apply. I'll teach you, and then I want you to apply a data discussion protocol that I call ORID that is going to help you, again, flip that 7 card, but also check your A's and your 4s, right? What do you know? What might you need to know in order to make sure you're moving in the right direction? So we'll talk about ORID. And then we will do a SWOT analysis based on your area of focus. Just so, again, you're making sure you are being intentional about planning for the potential 7s, right? Those threats, but also making the best use of opportunities and strengths in your area. So we'll engage in that protocol. And then we wanted to be intentional about just having a time for you to ask specific questions to me or to the TA specialists that are on the call from the IEP Center about your plan. Like if you just have some coaching needs, we want to save some time to do that as well. So that's the plan for today. Again, we encourage you to ask questions, make use of the chat, and if your question is broader than a chat, then raise your hand and we will certainly invite you to unmute yourself. All right, so thinking about that current plan, I didn't ask, but I want to now just take a moment, and you can use, again, your reactions, or you can put in the chat. Let me know if you attended session 1. that was our in-person session. Up north, we had some weather in the Indianapolis area. Some people ended up not being able to make it. So yes, you were there, or no, you couldn't make it. Let's just see who we have here. Okay, cool. So most of you were there. If you weren't, then I heard that there was a link to session one that you got access to. So most of that content, hopefully you were able to review. If not, I encourage you to do that so that today makes you're able to connect a little more to that. I think you'll still be all right today because we're going to be talking in broad strokes, but glad that most of you were with me earlier for session one and are ready to move forward. Okay, so your current plan. Remember the aim. We were aiming for educational equity, which just meant that we were focusing on growing all of our students, all while being intentional about reducing the gaps between the highest and lowest performing students and eliminating the predictability of who was at the top and the bottom. So our goal is really an all student goal with intentionality about what are the things in our district that are causing the gaps and what do we do in terms of our actions and our resources to be intentional about closing those. We talked about success gaps last time, and as we kind of process what those were, there were 5 areas of focus that I asked you to really pay attention to and consider which spoke to you as it relates to what your needs in your district are. So database decision making, cultural responsiveness, core instructional programming, assessment, both behavior and academic, as well as the tiered interventions and supports that are in place or not in place in your district. So when we talk about areas of focus today, really want you to be thinking one or more of these 5. That's where you should have ended up in session one. So with that in mind, one of our final tasks from session one was for you to name kind of what was it that you desired, right? What's the value around one or more of those 5 areas? What were the things that you expected in terms of behavior? And then how were you going to measure that? So I just want you to take a couple minutes to kind of go back through your notes or chat with your teammates that are with you today and think about what I want you to be able to say to all of us, and we'll have you share out what's that area of focus that you're going to talk about today, think about today. What behaviors or what are those actions associated with the development of that area of focus, and then how might you measure that? So that's your task for the next 2 minutes. Identify your area of focus, the actions associated with it, and then how you plan to measure it based on your conversations in session one. 2 minutes. All right, that's the 2-minute timer. So I'd like for you to share what is your district's or school's area of focus? What particular actions did you identify in session one or subsequent to session one that are associated with that area of focus? And then what were some of the outcomes you were measuring? How were you measuring those things? So who would like to share with us? You can probably unmute yourself. I think you should be able to. If you can't, just raise your hand if you'd like to go. Maybe I'll try to unmute for you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hey, Cody.
Yeah. So I think the thing I left really thinking that we wanted to work on or think about as a school here at one of the schools I work with was our explicit teaching time inside of our resource lab time. So trying to really maximize explicitly teaching towards some of those gaps in IEP goals and things like that, and kind of reevaluating how we're doing those. And some of the kind of the steps we took is we created some planning time so that those teachers can meet with the instructional coach and kind of pre-plan a lot of lessons, because planning almost always is going to lead to better instruction if we're kind of on it. So created some of that planning time, and how we're kind of tracking that is scheduling some kind of follow-up reflection time with the instructional coach and doing kind of some informal walkthroughs and co-teaching with our instructional coach to kind of gauge how that process is going. So that's kind of the whole thing that we're working towards a little bit there.
Great. Thanks for sharing, Cody. Anybody else like to share? Going once. I'm going to move on. If you don't wish to share, that's okay, but I just want to give you the opportunity. That'll help me be a better coach and probably your TA specialist too. But again, your choice. It's your choice. All righty, seeing no hands. Oh, there's somebody coming in. Let's then, well, what I want to say, thank you, Cody, for sharing. And I'll just kind of use that example. And you and everyone else apply it to your situation since I don't know your specifics. So more like instructional programming is Cody and his is what Cody and his colleagues are focusing on. What they expect, what they value is that there's intentional planning related to meeting IEP goals for all students, no matter where they are, right? That we're maximizing that teaching time, that instructional time with all of our students, particularly students with IEPs. And so what we expect is that there is intentional planning around what that instruction needs to look like. And so establishing some very specific connections with instructional coaches to help me if I don't really have the level of expertise or knowledge to do that is one component that is going to align with the behavior you want me to execute. And how are you monitoring that? Monitoring that through some anecdotal reflections, but also some very quantitative walkthroughs to look at what the instructional time is like in these in the resource reflection areas. Right, Cody? Okay. So again, as an example, you want to be clear on what it is you're trying to intervene around, how you plan to do that, and how you're going to measure it. So if you're not clear on that, you want to do that process in this next section that I'm going to share with you and invite you to try out. So again, today's session is all about helping you dig deeper. So if you haven't done that work, the next step you should move on to, right? You really have to be clear about that focus and the plan and how you're going to measure it. So with that in mind, we spent a lot of time in session one thinking about the difference between root cause and actionable causes. And so across the 5 whys activities that we did, you were really trying to get to actionable things that you can intervene on. So if we were to do a 5 whys around why are students maybe not showing growth academically, special education students, this is all hypothetical based on Cody's sharing. But let's say we did a 5 why statement from that. And one of the things we boiled down to was that there are no intentional instructional plans, right? That's where we landed on. That's why it became our area of focus. You want whatever came out of your 5 whys to be in direct alignment to what you're now saying your area of focus is, the behaviors that you're engaged in, and what you're measuring. All of that should be connected to the 5 whys that we talked a lot about in session 1. All of that goes together. You should be seeing those that 5 why activity is helping you get to the action that would support change related to the areas of growth that you seek to realize. And then I also wanted to just offer a reminder that I asked you to really think about mindset, skill set, and tool set. So you might not be turning the 7 card if you haven't thought about these 3 things as it relates to your area of focus. So as we just went through that example with Cody and his team, you want to make sure that you have clearly identified what's the mindset needed in order for someone to do that. I could set up time for you to plan with your instructional coach, but will you execute it? You might not if your mindset is that not my responsibility, like special ed teacher, come in and handle that, right? If I don't have the mindset that is part of my responsibility to help close gaps for all students, then just the action of aligning me or connecting me with an instructional coach might not get the outcome that you want. Same thing around tool set. Like the tool set that Cody and team are building here is we have intentional time, planning time for teacher and instructional coach to meet and plan what the instruction needs to look like. That's the tool. The resource we're using is the instructional coach. But what if it's really a skill set that I lack as teacher, right? So I need to actually be able to think about how I can provide high quality instruction to a range of students that I'm working with. What if I'm really good at providing middle of the road instruction, but I don't really capture the highs and students who need some reminders or some reteaching, right? I can follow the specifics, plan for the day, but if students aren't capturing what I need them to know through that plan, I don't have the skill set to advance it or reframe it so they can get it. That's a skill set, right? So again, I'm connecting dots for you again in session 1. When you get to the actions, that's one thing, right? But also make sure you've turned the 7 card by thinking about mindset, skill set, tool set needed in order to really support implementation of those actions that you've designed. So as you think about that, I want you to be thinking about what's missing that you may need to plan for. And if that's missing, how are you going to address that with the resources you have? So I'm going to show you this quick video from Simon Sinek. You likely have seen it. It's really that golden circle but it's a reminder to us to really be clear about the why so that we have vision for all of the things, all the factors within your building, within the people that we might need to impact. So here's Simon Sinek's golden circle, focusing on really getting to the why. First, thumbs up if you can see that. Yes, okay, thank you.
I think it's frozen, Renee.
Frozen? Okay, let's see. All right. I will make sure you get the link. I mean, it's a powerful video, but probably is true that it's gonna buffer. It's some rain here in Indy where I am. So I will just make sure, in fact, let me do it now. Let me put sorry. I think it's my computer that's frozen because I can't really do anything. Okay, so I am going to put that link in the chat now. All right, there you go. There's the there is that. So here's my hope for you that you'll spend some time watching that with your team or on your own and make connections to the big vision of the why for you. Why have you chosen one of these 5 areas? How is that getting toward the goal of educational equity? And moreover, when you think about the outcomes and the what associated with it, which are really the actions and the things that you're measuring, how are you intentionally connecting the why to those things to encourage the players, right? Staff to really engage in the work in a way that is sustainable, right? We don't want to see this work as only as a check, like something we have to do because the department is asking us to do it, but how is it really connected to who we are as a school community? So I think he does a good job of really painting that picture of let's not always focus on the outcomes that we want. Outcomes are important, but if we focus on the why and we connect all our behaviors to that, we get to the outcomes. So make sure that you save that link because subsequent to our session, it won't be there. Maybe I'll put it up on the Padlet if I remember. Let me write myself a note. All right. Yeah, I'll put it up on the Padlet. All right. So moving forward, let me start sharing again. We're going to jump into this conversation about data. Remember, I said one of the objectives was for us to learn a protocol to talk about our current outcomes, what we need to know. So data really is only as good as the decisions that we make with it, right? We always collect a lot of data, but how are we using that to inform our next steps? So one of the tools that we use at Virtuoso to really get people to talk about data in a similar way at the same time is the ORID method. Now, I know all of you have skill sets around looking at data and talking about data, but I hope that you can connect to the experience of sitting around a table with your colleagues looking at data, and you see something and they see something different. And so you're talking about those things at the same time. And before you know it, everybody's talking about how they feel about the data, and you don't really get to the action that you need to. So the ORID process really helps with that. So ORID is a specific facilitation framework that promotes focused conversations with a group, right? So we're all talking about data, but it's going to help us talk about that in a focused way. So ORID stands for the 4 stages of the protocol: objective, reflective, interpretive, and decisional. And so our goal is that when we use this protocol to talk about whatever piece of data or data points that we have in front of us, we move through each of these stages sequentially so that we're all talking about the same thing in the same way at the same time. So if you're trying to just make sense of the data, but I'm already at what to do about the data, that is going to make our conversation less focused. So the ORID protocol, again, is designed to keep us all on the same page at the same time. So at the objective level, the whole purpose is just to identify the data, examine what we know factually, not what we think about it, not why it is, just what we know. So in Cody's example, I would say, well, what do you know about instructional time, right? And how, and what do you know about the percentage of teachers that have an actual plan? What do you know about students with IEPs that aren't getting those that instructional component met? Like, those are objective pieces of data that we need answers to. Right? So what are the factual pieces of information that we know based on the data? And then moreover, because we're looking at gaps, you have to think about what trends do you see both within and between subgroups. So if we're looking at reading data, for example, what commonalities do we see across all 3rd graders, for example? But then what are nuances that we see between subgroups of 3rd grade students related to their reading performance, as an example? So you should spend a significant amount of time. Let's say you have 30 minutes to talk about data. You should spend a third of it getting the data out. People rush through this thinking they know exactly all there is to know, but sometimes we're not even talking about the data accurately. So spend a third of your time just getting the facts down. So secondly is the reflective level. And at this level, you are encouraging folks to make connections, to think about how they feel about the data. What, Renee? Feel about the data? Data is, yes, how they feel about the data, their initial reactions. How does it make them feel? What thoughts come up for them? What are they surprised about? What are they encouraged about? Why might this be important? Somebody put it in the chat or unmute yourself. Why might it be important to capture how people feel about data?
I think it captures some of their mindsets about things, whatever the data is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You're really thinking about mindset here. You're identifying elephants in the room, right? Things that people are feeling, and maybe having a reaction or a response to. Linda says it helps you know if they even get it, Yeah, maybe they're like, well, I don't feel that like that's right because those percentages don't add up. That might show you they don't really understand what they're reading. And so let's go back to the objective level and make sense of it. That's another reason why, Linda, thanks for bringing that up, that you should really spend a third of your time talking about objectives. So everyone's on the same page about what you are looking at. Yeah, you know, people often feel negatively about the data. Imagine we're talking about third grade reading data, and I'm a third grade reading teacher, and we're talking about the problems we have to solve in third grade. I could potentially feel a certain way, right? I am one of the teachers you're talking about, students who have negative performance. I may feel as if through that conversation that you're also making some assumptions about my skill set. So I might feel kind of a way. And when people are not able to be clear or to communicate their feelings, then that's a missed opportunity to turn the 7 card. When you don't know the mindset or the feeling, then you sometimes then later down the road, you're like, they did not apply any of the stuff that I taught. You know why? Because they had a feeling, a negative feeling associated with it that you didn't help them work through. Right? So really give people time to talk, invite them to talk about how they feel, not what they think, but how they feel about this piece of data that you are sharing or discussing. The next step is interpretive level. Here's where you can put all your smarts together, right? All the skill sets, all the knowledge, all the best practice, and think about, okay, interpret it. Why do I think the data is showing up in the way it is? You're talking about connections here. What patterns do you see? What insights does this data provide for you? What's the big picture? Maybe this is where you would identify what the data is not telling you and what else you might need to know. So this is a point where we just start to make sense of the data. This is oftentimes where we start. I want you to really try hard not to start here. I'm inviting you to try something new instead of starting here, which is what most of us do. I want you to start with just all talking about the data, getting feelings out about data, then making sense, connecting what you know, what your experiences are with what the data actually say. So here you might identify a lot of classroom level things or system level things that are impacting the data from your perspective. And then the last step is the D, which is the decisional level. And that is what's our best next step, not complete cure, right? How to really resolve all the things. Because if we knew that, we would have done that. But what's the next best thing based on our conversation about the data factually and why we think that data is showing up in that way? So what this is about, what people are willing to commit to. I'm willing to commit to meeting with the instructional coach once a week for 15 minutes to help me plan how to support my students with IEPs during instructional time. I'm willing to commit to that, right? Whatever it is, for whatever your area of focus is, you want to think about those decisions that everyone is clear about being on the same page around. Now, here's also where you might begin to respond to what you identified in the interpretive level, other pieces of data that you need. So maybe it's like, well, we don't really know, we don't have data right now about how students performed in English language arts in 2nd grade, right? So we need that data. Where were those gaps, and have we responded to those gaps in 3rd grade, right? So that could be an I wonder, and that could be an action, a next best step that you all can make. So again, don't think of decisional as resolving all the things, but what is the next best thing related to your discussion around data? So most of the time will be on the O, objective level, but allow people to flush out their reflections and then have some brainstorming about the why of the data, and make sure you have at least one or two decisions about your next step. So this is where it was really important for you to be clear about your area of focus, the actions associated with it, and how you're planning to measure it, because I want you now to practice ORAD related to what your area of focus is. What have you been doing? What data have you collected? What do you know? And if you feel like you can't do that right now, then I want you to plan for what data do you need to collect so that you're able to do ORAD. And furthermore, I see some of you are individuals without your team. So I want you to be thinking about who is the team that would need to engage in ORAD. So if you have the data, I want you to be thinking, I want you to move through the ORAD process. If you don't have the data, I want you to think about what data would you be collecting in alignment with your area of focus that you would want to apply the ORAD process to, and then who's the team that does that. A bigger vision for you all is to set a time to do that. Like when would be the time to do it? Are you going to do it before the end of March? Or are you going to do it the first week of April? I would like for you to be thinking that too. Questions about ORAD? I'm going to give you some time to process what I just asked you to do, either engage in ORAD or plan around it. But questions before I let you do that? The ORAD protocol is in your Padlet. So that should be the second document there. There's a template that you can copy. And what I typically do if I'm facilitating the ORAD process in a space is let everyone either have shared access to that document, we all type in it, or just print it out and they write their ideas, and then we just round robin without discussion. I just say, everybody give me one objective statement. We just go around and do that. Everybody give me a reflective statement. We go around the other way. But you really want this to be a process where everyone is sharing their ideas about each of these levels. I'm looking for the chat and I'm looking for hands. I don't see any questions. All right, so I'm going to give you 5 minutes to either begin the ORAD or plan for ORAD. And then at the end of 5 minutes, I would like some share outs around your thoughts around this protocol, how you would use it, or if you use it, how it was helpful. And if you didn't use it, when you might plan to. All right, so I'll set my timer for 5 minutes. This is your 2 minute. You have 2 minutes left. All righty. Let's chat about it. What are your thoughts about Word? Some of you, I don't know. I don't want to assume some of you may already use it. So if you just kind of try the process out, tell us about that experience, or tell us about your plans for trying it out. What kind of data or do you think will be important to collect? Who will be important to engage in this protocol with? And when might you do it? So who'd like to share? Again, you can unmute yourself.
I can start us. Like EVSC, we've been working a lot with our whole corporation, all of our schools, all of our administration, and really looking at like at the organization level, kids like not meeting our LRE targets, which is then kind of resulting in lower performance or lower student outcomes. And so kind of reshaping even how we work to look at our data and look at how we're serving students and even building schedules and making placement decisions based on individual student data versus like the old way of like building a master schedule and then plugging kids in after the fact. So just kind of reshaping all of those things to move towards meeting the state and national targets and supporting kids better in our buildings.
I think you're muted.
You're
Um,
muted, Dr. Aziz.
I always forget that part. Thanks for sharing. Love it. So thinking about making improvements around LRE, remind us about, would you say that revising how you build schedules was an actionable root cause that you came up with last time? Yes, right? Yes. Okay. So
Yes.
so if actionable root cause is we are not using student data to inform how we build schedules. Now think about what's the pieces of data that you would need to collect in order to tell that story. What data sources would you be looking at?
So like we've pulled all of our district level data and we've presented it at a district level and then also at an individual school level data sets. So we're kind of being able to target, like even the subgroups within the data sets and looking at like I mean, one thing like students of color were more likely to be served in a resource room or outside of the LRE 50 and different things like that where we're pulling it apart, like free and reduced lunch, all of the different things where we're trying to target and have real conversations about what's not only happening at the district level, but in the school level as well.
So
Great.
some of
Go
the
ahead.
data we're pulling is that LRE data, right? And then also looking at schedules, which is a little bit trickier because we're, in the middle of the year, but planning ahead for next year, looking at school schedules and supporting the work and with principals building those schedules for their buildings, and then kind of going back and analyzing the data and seeing, also just giving them tools, right, Ellen, to like think about things differently, and you don't have to have a space, right? It doesn't have to be built into the schedule to have that student receive specially designed instruction.
Yes.
So
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 great.
that, I think you were also asking like to even build that schedule before we do that. We're looking at the individual student, like the NWEA scores, their psych evals, and we're digging into that data even more to see even how many classes we need of an inclusion, how many classes we need of co-teaching, how many classes. So we're digging into that data even first to
Mhm.
see how many sections of whatever we need in the schools.
Like really targeting like what the students in your building need versus like building a master schedule and plugging in chugging kids in it backwards.
So we kind of are digging into two sets of
Resetting
data.
that, yeah.
So
Mhm. Yeah.
I think that's
So big
And that's
picture.
like a lot of the mind shit. So
I was just gonna say that. Yeah, I was just gonna say that. So that what you just communicated is a whole mindset shift, that as opposed to just building a master schedule, you get in if your schedule allows. What we're saying instead is we should be designing a student schedule based on their specific needs, which we say we do, but our behavior doesn't show it, right?
correct.
correct.
So one of the things I can visualize as you are trying to then get principals, counselors, all the people on board with this approach is, as you've started to do already, think about LRE. What do we know right now? And what does that look like across various subgroups as you communicated? But just do that and really see when they look at that, what are their takeaways? Because you all have a particular takeaway, but principals, counselors might be, well, yeah, well, we don't, I mean, that's really what's going to get their needs met best if they're in a resource pullout room. Like that could be a thought. That would be what you found out as you did reflective. And then interpretive for you all, you might be saying we could be more strategic in terms of how we build those schedules because you have the skill set to know how to do that. But others might be like, well, I mean, if they are 3 grade levels behind, what do you want me to do? Right. So as you have that discussion in interpretive, making connections, all that comes out. And then ultimately, you're getting to where you want to go, which is looking forward to next year. How do we revise the plan? But through this conversation, you have an increase in the likelihood that those that you're engaged, that you allow to engage in this process will be with you when you get to that decision level, right? Right now, there could be a lot of gaps between where you currently are and where you desire to go. That's the benefit of the ORAD method. So hopefully you'll be able to apply it with either a building or all your principals or counselors, whatever. But I think it'd be beneficial as you move forward. Good job. Thanks for sharing. Okay, I see Linda's hand raised.
I was going to say, I don't know if anybody else from my team has gotten on yet, but we have district discussions about data. We have building discussions. We have the PLCs where you have all the teachers at that grade level. But one thing that I am trying to push now is individual teacher data dig. And what that looks like is that have a sub come in to cover the teacher's rooms, and the teacher comes into our team meeting with their data about all the children in their room. And we have a discussion. And the main thing for me is, do you see what I see? As I said earlier, we make the assumption that everybody knows and everybody is interpreting things the same way. But I think we have to have realistic, hands-on, direct conversations. And so as we sit with the teacher, usually there's an administrator, and if there's an academic interventionist, behavior interventionist, we talk about every student. This kid's on target. We can really push him. This one's suffering. Oh, yes, he's in my group for academics. Oh, well, he needs to be here for behavior. We have honest discussion about each child's information. And what I find is that teachers are going to study the data a little more. Teachers are going to be prepared to talk about those students. And that is about as close and homey and comfortable as you can get with understanding, do you see what I see, going over expectations and that kind of thing. So I'm old school. I'm 73. I just believe in a hands-on approach. And I believe that we have to make sure everybody has the same understanding, especially in schools where you have a number of teachers that just haven't had the formal training. So they're learning on the spot. And I just think we just have to have a really strong data dig.
I love it. And I agree. Yes, absolutely. And I think what you spoke to, having that approach with individual teachers, is really how you manifest ORID on an everyday basis. Sometimes one of the other things I notice is that we say we're bringing all of the data together. Sometimes that's overwhelming as well. So if you just hone in on a certain type of data, right, and just think about, what do you see? Do you see what I see? What can we do about that? What's our next best action? Just isolating in that way is also very helpful to get to an actionable set of next steps. So I love the practice that you described, Linda, and I imagine it's super helpful for teachers and subsequently then the students that they support. Thanks
Dr.
for-
Renee, sorry,
Hi.
I'd like
Yeah.
to kind of share out too some information from our school that we use. So we use a test called Kaufman Test of Educational Achievement. It helps to drive the IEP writing process goals within the IEP. And so oftentimes we'll see use that data and apply it to help making a goal, writing a goal for a student, whether it's for writing, reading, math, whatever it may be. And so we had planned on implementing the ORID process as far as meeting with individual teachers regarding their progress monitoring of students. We've been kind of seeing some fluctuations in levels, and they may get 100% and then a 50 at one time or 0, to kind of really hone in on what it looks like for those individual students and meeting with those teachers to kind of get that progress monitoring data up to par.
Super. Thanks for sharing that. Love that example. Yes. And kudos to you all for using KTA intentionally to write goals instead of those just arbitrary 80% student will 80% of whatever. Like, I love it. Here's also an associated idea, like maybe after doing that initial ORID, so you're making sense of what you're noticing in the KTA data, especially in the cases where you're seeing high fluctuations in terms of progress monitoring. That might be when you can then do a 5 whys with that teacher to really get to like, what is that about? Because you can start with the question, why might the student scores be fluctuating, right? They might say, well, they came late that day, or they had behavior, you can just kind of dig down and to the very specific things that might be influencing factors that are going on with the student. That's turning the 7 card, right? So love that. I love that example. Super. Anybody else want to share? Appreciate those of you that did. So again, this is a helpful protocol for you to be for you to use with key stakeholders that have some investment around your area of focus to make sure you are all clear about the current reality of the data. You get a sense of how people feel about that so that you can then address whatever misnomers or feelings, negative feelings that are associated with those outcomes. And then have a more informed discussion about your next steps based on connections that you see. So just one tip, it's harder to do than it looks on paper. It looks like, oh, we just go through ORID. We are not trained to talk in that way about data. We really immediately start talking about all the things and why and what and all of that. And we don't, you'll find that it's very hard for people to make a factual statement about data. Like, for example, in the KTA, I would say the student scored X percentile on this subtest. That would be a factual, objective statement. But people will say things like, they're below grade level on the KTA. Yeah, we know that. That's why they already have that, right? So like, how do we be specific? That's true, but how do we get to something that we can quantify so that we can make a goal based on that, right? So you might find that you need to coach your staff up around how to make objective statements, and you might not anticipate needing to do that, but you might find that you do. The other thing I would say is, I can't reiterate enough around your focused area, your area of focus for your whatever your needs are in your district. You want to be so clear about what it is, your why, like what it is that you're really trying to impact, so that you can be sure you're looking at the data that you need to look at. Sometimes we have patterns of behavior that we're like, oh yeah, well, let's just look at X data. But there could be some data that we don't even collect that would really help us add to our conversation and potential actions if we collected it. You might find that you have to collect it. I'm thinking back to Cody's example of adding walkthrough data. Well, now we probably need to sum that walkthrough data and say, in this week's walkthroughs, we found X, right? That might be something you're not yet doing that would be very important to your overall action. So again, that is one of the tools we wanted to teach today, and we hope that you will find it useful as you move forward. Any final questions about ORID? Okay, Erica says they're going to try the process with teachers or records using students on their caseload focusing. Oh, yeah, okay. Using KTA data. All right, we talked through that. All right. Okay, so I want to talk about a SWOT analysis real quick. I believe it's likely that most of us, given our roles, have at least heard of a SWOT analysis before. But if you haven't, no worries. We're just doing a basic SWOT analysis today to help us think about strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats as they relate to our area of focus. Again, hard to do if you are not clear on the area of focus. And why do you keep saying that, Renee? Here's the thing. I don't want your area of focus to be, we want to improve outcomes for all of our students. Like, that's too general. I mean, we could even say too general would be, we don't have enough students in LRE. That might be too general. Like, I don't know. Like, you all need to get to the point where you're very specific, and that you are, I mean, of course, like that's what you'll find when you listen to Simon's video, like that outcome, that overall outcome of LRE or increased academics on X skill, like English language arts, for example, those are the long-term outcomes, but those outcomes come from the very specific processes and behaviors that we want to build. So I want you to, when I say area of focus, I want you to be thinking about the processes that you're really trying to shift, to change. So with that in mind, I want you to think about strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats as it relates to that specific area of focus. So when you think about a strength, you're thinking about resources, actions, things that are already in place in your environment that with these new or behavior established. For example, if I am trying to get teachers or counselors or principals to get counselors to use like master schedules for students, and they already have a high skill set around use of data, strength, like they know how to read the data. If you didn't have people who knew how to really look at data, make sense of it, that would be a weakness, because how would then they ever be able to use that to engage in the behavior, the new behavior that you want? So what strengths currently exist that would support the area of focus, the specific area of focus that that you need? Let me see the chat. Oh, am I going in and out? What? Sorry. As soon as you all break for your SWOT analysis, I will try to move off of Wi-Fi to my official, but it's not raining now, so I don't know. I apologize. Okay, seems like some say it's better now. Okay, so strengths, weaknesses. Weaknesses would be current practices that do not reinforce the behavior that you want people to be engaged in. What are the current systems in place or the current skill sets that are discrepant from the new behavior that you desire people to engage in? So really think about at the system level, but maybe even at the individual level, to Ms. Linda's point, like, is it that teachers don't have necessarily all the skill sets that they need? That could be a weakness. So then moving on, so strengths and weaknesses are all going to be these internal things that you're thinking about, things that are internal to your system. The opportunities and threats might be outside of your particular school. They might be at the district level, they might be community related, they might be the things that you at the community, school community, don't have true locus of over, know they're impacting student outcomes or teacher behavior. So what are those external things that would support the behavior that you are trying to develop? Are there resources in the community or in the district that are aligned to these opportunities, these behaviors that, again, you want individual teachers or buildings to begin to implement? So when you think about opportunities, ask yourself the question, what are things that we can leverage to support these behaviors? And finally, threats are those things that potentially are going to be barriers that you need to really work through and have conversations about. What will be some of the factors that prevent folks from sustaining or implementing effectively the behaviors that you want? Is it time? Probably is all time is always going to be an issue, but what else might it be? Is it mindset? Is it a community value or concern? Is it whatever, right? It could be a range of things based on whatever your area of focus is. So I want you to, again, apply that thinking to your area of focus. I just wanted to give you a couple of examples. So again, you're going to think about internal strengths and weaknesses and external opportunities and threats. So I was with a district not too long ago, and they were talking about academic outcomes, right? Improving academic outcomes, but particularly closing gaps across subgroups around the cultural responsivity area. That it was one of their area of focus. So strengths, they were already working to design or redesign their curriculum to make sure that it was responsive to all students. They had leaders who were ready to do the hard work to have conversations about what does cultural responsivity even look like or mean. They had building and corporation leaders that were aware of the need for work because they had done the ORAD. They saw the objective data, like it wasn't just how I felt, but here's what it is. We all know that we have gaps that we are responsible for closing. And they also said that many policies had been developed intentionally with inclusivity and responsivity in mind. Right. So as they were developing or updating their policies around lesson planning and even some of the curriculum choices that they had selected, all those were done with this goal in mind of how do we make sure that the needs of all of our students are being met in the way that they need, right? That responsivity piece. Some of the weaknesses, they were really struggling with thinking about what was best for all students without, or at the same time, thinking about the different values or beliefs across students. Remember, they were working on issues of cultural responsivity. So they were having a really hard time thinking through some of those more divisive topics, right? How do we be responsive to what a certain student might need if those beliefs are discrepant from another? We had hard conversations about how that might be a personal thing that you're reading in here. Is that a true thing? What's the data, right? That's all I always say. Well, how do we know that that's true? That could be a feeling, and that feeling could be my hypersensitivity around the issue. But so how do we discern that? What's the data? Fear of starting the work and not having the support from the community to continue it. So, we still live in an age where school boards can be really hot spots for people to come and voice all of their stuff. And they really had a fear for that. They wanted to have a peaceful community. They didn't want this work to be a thing in their district in terms of a negative perspective. Some folks just were of the mindset that this desire, this need to address academics through a culturally responsive lens would just pass. Like, are we just jumping on a bandwagon here, and will that just pass, or is it really something we need to do? Now, the building and corporation leaders were like, yeah, we look at the data, we did ORAD, but if you are not doing ORAD, we're talking about 5 whys with teachers, they'll say bandwagon, right? That could be something you would come to understand by doing reflective work. And then another weaknesses was their practices. Again, they are revising policies, but their current practices may not be all that equitable, right? How they are engaging with students with special needs, or how they are addressing behavior of students of different genders and ethnicities or race was not all that equitable as seen in their data, right? So those are just some of the weaknesses that they came up with. Now, external to that, they had lots of programming in their community that would support the development of the cultural lens where they were. They also had strong connections with other school corporations that had really strong academic programs and policies and procedures that they were connecting with. Their school was changing, which they felt like was a way, something they could leverage for the why of the work. And also because of that changing community, they felt like the timing was right, really to take a hard look at their instructional practices. Threats, political climate, we all feel that wherever we are. Going too fast was something that they worried about too. How do they, as their community is changing and they are then beginning to do this hard work as a school community, how do they make sure that people, families that have been in the district historically over time feel like they are still a part of the community and things aren't changing too fast for them? That gets to some of that polarizing concern or threat that they identified. And then just other people's beliefs, acting as red herrings to kind of try to stop the work. So this is an example, like here is an opportunity where you're really processing thoughts and feelings that again are opportunities for you to turn a 7 card or to validate strengths that exist and opportunities. The strengths and opportunities would be like your A and 4 cards, right? Threats are certainly threats and weaknesses are certainly your 7 cards. So when you're thinking about a SWOT analysis, I want you to really think about anecdotal things, about what you feel, what you have heard. Really get at that level outside of the concrete data. We've done that through ORID, but here you really want to tap into the culture of the environment so that you can plan for that. Questions about SWOT? Okay, if not, you can head back to the Padlet. I put the QR code again. The QR code will give you a template for SWOT that looks like this. And I want you to just try to write 1 or 2 things. I'm not asking you to complete the process fully here, but just maybe write 1 or 2 things that are aligned with your area of focus. So that goes at the top. What is your area of focus? Always be tuned into that specific thing as you're talking about things that are helpful and harmful, both internally or externally, to establishing these new behaviors. So I'll set the timer for 5 minutes again, and then we'll check in. You might need a couple more minutes, but we'll see. Let's start with 5. And I'm going to pop off and pop on and try to get this Wi-Fi right. Okay, just a minute and a half left. All right, that was 5 minutes. Any aha moments that you discovered in that conversation, or maybe you need more time? I can do that check as well. If you feel like you,
I think sorry. I was gonna answer what we were doing, but.
Okay, that's good.
Okay, for us, like we talked about like the strengths that we're seeing is like schools are actually diving into their individual student data to make decisions about scheduling. And we're seeing changes to like practices overall, like district-wide. And schools, I think our weakness or the harmful thing that we're seeing is people are still having the mindset of wanting to like be like, well, this is an exception because this kid's behavior is an exception to the rule, so they should just jump to special ed testing or whatever. So like just inconsistencies to interventions around behavioral protocols and like jumping back to them falling into their mindset not being in the right place when it comes to kids with behavioral challenges.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, so then specifically around those weaknesses, as a team, spend some time thinking about actions that you might be able to hone in on related to that. Of course, things that I know you've probably already done, but what is the conversation that I could, if people are not having those exception clauses for academics, for example, or less frequently for academics, what are your opportunities for making parallels between treating behavior like academics, right? So that
so that's what our next district development is going to be for all the principals, like is really going to hone in on that behavioral piece, because that's where we're seeing our area of weakness right now is.
perfect. Super duper.
Yeah, and I would just jump off that too and just say, I think our behavior data isn't as consistent as our academic data.
That's good too. Point of discussion, even potentially, right? 5 whys. Why might our behavior data not be as consistent, right? Getting to things that then you can take action around in that regard. Is it lack of skill? Is it lack of a system in the same way? Like all the things. So we can go back to some of those other tools to help us identify that. Love it. Super. Any other ahas or thoughts that came from anyone else's SWOT conversation? All right, seeing none, I am going to encourage you to do that more fully as a team with your team if they're not here, so that you can really address things that might stand in the way of executing successfully the actions that you've outlined, but also things that you can leverage both within and external to the school community. And then these 3 questions, once you've done a fuller SWOT, I want you to be able to answer as a team. How do you make the most of those opportunities? Specifically your strengths, like not just noticing that they're strengths, but for example, if people are getting better at data, how do you highlight that so that they then they're reinforced for really using the data, not just knowing what to do with it, but using it? Like, how do you, again, leverage that? In what ways can those strengths help you overcome some threats? So if you know a weakness or a threat is around people's concern about behavior, how might you be able to leverage the strength of data analysis? How might you be able to use that strength in a way that helps them be able to understand behavior with more focus? For example, if you can teach them how to use tools, if you can develop a skill set for helping them use tools to understand the nature of behavior, maybe if you can create additional tools for them to use so that they really have a better understanding of the nature of that student's behavior and then have some associated responses to it, that might be a way of leveraging their skill set and their appreciation for data in order to respond, for example, to those weaknesses. And then the 3rd question, what actions are needed in order to help you lessen the impact of those weaknesses that you discovered? So once you have done a fuller SWOT with more members of your team, really make sure that you have addressed these 3 critical questions and then revise your action plan based on those findings. Flipping the 7 card again. All right, well, the last thing I want to chat with you about is around what I want you to be prepared for when we're back together in April, I think. So as you prepare for that session, I want you to write at least one statement related to student level and system levels outcomes. That's really going to be our focus in session 3. So I want you to consider this 3-part statement. If we did this behavior, think about actionable root causes, actionable behaviors. If you did X, then you would expect what outcome at what level? So if we provided a plan day of the week for all teachers to meet with instructional coaches, right? That's if we did the action, then we would expect an increase in effective instruction during the English language arts block, whatever, right? I'm just making this up as we go. That's what you're expecting at the what level? Is that a system level thing that you expect to see across all classrooms? If so, that's a system level. But if we, for example, provided professional development around analysis of behavior, then we would expect teachers to be able to be more intentional and specific in the interventions they're provided to students at the student level, right? So what I'm asking you to do here is to identify, based on your area of focus, actions that impact your whole system and specific actions that, if done by staff consistently, would impact students. Two different things. Whatever your area of focus is really should be impacting systems and students. Although you might have a lens for one or the other, they really should be impacting both. So before April's session, we really want to be thinking about student and systems level outcomes. I'm asking you to think about these statements now so that you can look then at your action plans, look at the things that you're measuring, and make sure you're collecting the right data and you're developing or you're engaged in the right actions in order to develop that skill. So based on those statements that you write, identify actions and resources, and again, how you plan to measure. That first question I asked you this morning, I want you to think about that based on the at least 2 statements that you write, one for students, one for systems. Questions about this task? So when we are together in April, we're going to start here. I'm going to have everybody chart paper up what their statements are, because that's going to be the foundation to our conversation. All right. So again, we'll be April 29th in Maryville and the 30th in Indy, focusing specifically on systems and student level outcomes based on the year of your work and then what might be next. So at this point, the third objective that we set for the day was just to have some intentional coaching. So I do want to reserve the remainder of time for anybody that wants just some one-on-one feedback around your plan. I'm happy to chat with you about that. We can go into a breakout room to do that. Or if you needed support from any of the TA specialists from the IEP TA Center, I'm sure they are equally available during this time. So I'll process questions that are good for the whole. And then if you would like to have a subsequent conversation about your individual school or district, we can do that too. Before I ask for those questions, want to make sure that you complete the evaluation. Thank you, Rosalind, put it in the chat, but you can see it also here. It's also in your Padlet handouts. Thank you so much for your comments last time. They were very helpful. I appreciate it. So continue with that pattern. Be fully transparent of what worked, what didn't, what you feel like you need that you didn't get, or that it was in alignment to what you felt like you needed. So please share that feedback. And then, yeah, questions, comments that are for the good of the whole. All right, in the chat, if you would like to talk about your team specific plan, just put that in the chat and we can make that happen. So thanks again for joining us. Do your evaluations, come prepared with your system level and student level statements in April. Take care, everybody.